Well, if you're logging on now, welcome to this paint along. It should be really fun. Something new maybe for you, certainly for me. People will probably be joining us in the next few moments. So if you're here already, well, time to grab a cup of tea, some biscuits, make sure your material's ready. And we'll start in a few moments. To Annie, I'm glad you're here to paint along with us. There is a bit of a lag, so when you hear me speaking, it's about like a 20-second lag. And I'm just having a look. We seem to have a bit of streaming problem. Right, okay. Sorry, I hope your buffering issues are back to normal. Now, while we're waiting for people to join us, I'd just like to say something about this live stream. So I'm Sebastian Applin. I'm a tutor at the Cardiff Open Art School, and I'm doing this video as part of the wider Cardiff Open Art School and Cardiff Met's end of year exhibition activities. But I will hopefully be carrying on with these and doing other subjects and making this into a regular venue. So please tell me if you can hear me, whether you can see me, and I'm just going to go through a bit about what we're going to be doing today. So the idea is really to get people enthusiastic about painting and engaged, and the only way of doing that is actually to get people actually painting. So what I propose to do today is to run through a few ideas of how you can manage this painting. So whatever level you're at, you should be fine to approach it. So as I said, you needn't approach a whole image. You should be able to see the image below me now. You could, but you could just choose the tractor or the cows or the figure or whatever it is. And, you know, if you've painted before, that's fine. If you're using different material, a lot of what I'm saying should be relevant to you. If you're using watercolour, then I can go through a few steps of what I'm actually doing myself. And please feel free to ask me questions as we go along. Now, material wise, I'm using, as I said, watercolour. This is my palette here. As you can see, it's oops, sorry, just get this up a bit here. Yeah, as you can see, these, I've got my colours just laid out here. They're actually in tubes and I just squeeze them out. And I've got nice deep wells here to mix paints in. But it doesn't really matter how many colours you've got. It doesn't matter, you know, whether you're using, you know, ground coffee or tea or whatever, because the main thing today certainly isn't about colour, but about tonal value. Yeah, and in particular about the negative space. So that's what we're going to be talking about mostly today. Apart from my palette here, I have brushes. This is my go-to brush. It's a kind of averagely quite large brush. I have others for nice big washes and some for like smaller bits, but it doesn't matter what brush you have really. It's all about using what you have, preferably a bigger brush rather than a smaller one. The paints I'm just using these Jackson's paints. They seem to be quite good value, you know, abundant paint in the tubes and quite a reasonable price. So the first thing then I want to do is just do a little warm-up introduction and speak to you about the negative image. So we'll start off then by, if you look at your screen in front here, what I've done is I've put a couple of props from my stash of toys. Now, in this one here, you can see the tree against a white background, and here this milkmaid against the green there. So what we're going to do is, yeah, good. What we're going to do is just do a little warm-up and talk about negative space. So in the first one here, sorry, let me just put this up a moment. In the first one, we have an image against a white background. So as a little warm-up, what we could do, we could just draw a little box like so, and imagine this is a painting and we're just going to paint the tree in. So we paint the tree in, we look at the shape like that. We put a box around this as well if you like. Can you see? Oops, like that. So what we're going to do is paint the tree. Now what's quite useful, and we're just doing outlines, a lot of what watercolour is doing outlines, not detail, just outlines. So you can see there, you've got my tree against the white paper. Now, the negative image in this instance would be, well, I don't know, the tree, I suppose. But we're looking at these lighter areas here and seeing how they correspond to the areas there. Now, on this one here, again, we're going to draw a little box around like that. This time I'm not going to draw the milkmaid herself, but I'm going to draw the area around the milkmaid. Now, because we can see here, there's a little space here, an area, another one here, another one here, and we're going to concentrate on those to paint rather than her. So the idea is not to worry about the figures themselves, but rather the area or the space around them. Okay, and that's what I refer to as a negative space. And it's used a lot in painting, particularly in watercolour, where you're having to go in with darker colours and then calibrate whether it's too dark or too light. But any kind of painting, oil painting's the same. You know, you put down a colour and you think, oh, that looks too dark. Well, if you put down a darker colour next to it, that colour lightens a bit. So it's looking at the foreground, the background, the positive space, the negative space as well. So here instead of drawing the milkmaid, I'm going to draw I'm going to look at these spaces and just try and paint them in. There's another space there, a little gap there. So I'm looking at these shapes. A little space down there. Bigger area over here I can see. Going up here. And that kind of shape is like a triangle, isn't it? So we could go all the way up like that. Paint that in. So for example, although it doesn't, it's kind of abstract, it does give us a basis of what would be the painting of that milk maid. We could also go into that a bit more and decide to cover her boots, maybe covering a little spaces in between. So we're chunking it down every time from the larger areas to the smaller ones, like that, refining the shapes as we go along. So that basically is what I mean by negative shapes. Right, let's see. So, okay, I think the stream is holding up. What I intend to do then is to be painting and talking at the same time about the process. Any questions you have, just write them down. As I said, there's a certain amount of buffering, so any questions that come up may take about 20 seconds. Well, no, they'll come up immediately, but it will take me, well, there'll be a lag before you hear my answer. So let's get to the main event. Now, as I say, we have about 2 hours to do this. If it takes you longer, that's fine. If you want to have a break in between, whatever you want to do, I'll be here painting. So let's have a look. So the first thing, I think what I'll do is I'll make the model nice and big, so that, if you're painting from home on a small screen, you can actually see what's going on. And then my painting is just going to be down there. So the first thing then would be to think about where the elements are going to go, so the composition. I didn't think too much about the composition when I set these little figures out. I just wanted something that would be quite accessible for people, something that people would quite like to paint. So I'm pretty much going to try and paint it as I see it. I'm not going to try and manipulate the figures too much, but as I say, if you want to concentrate just on the figure of in the front, or the tractor, or the cows, or whatever, or if you've got your own model you're painting at home, you can do that as well. So what I usually do, I just figure out where the center is. So the center's about there, and the line of the head of the lady is about in relation. Let's put it about here. And then the cows are just slightly lower, and the little calf down here. And the tractor, again, slightly lower, coming down there. And then obviously the tree is up here somewhere, like that. So I spend a bit of time just marking out where things are going to be. I don't put any detail in because I'll cover it over later with paint. Although paint is transparent and you can see the marks, I don't want to be limited by the pencil drawing. As you'll see, I'm not a very precise painter, so I will end up doing sort of a series of blotches more than sort of, you know, individual leaves of the tree. Where's my pencil? Right. So when I was talking about the negative space, it's also quite handy when you're doing a drawing. So for example, if you can see the space between the top of the lady's head and the cow in the background, you can see it kind of forms like a triangle, like that. Yeah, so that's kind of useful because it just allows you to navigate the drawing in terms of shapes rather than, you know, heads or tractor wheels or arms. Again, going down from her arm, you can see that it creates another little triangle there. So by looking at the negative shapes, I'm kind of eating into the figure and giving it a kind of design. The little cow down here, shape kind of goes down here. It's about level with the bottom of the pail, so it goes around there somewhere. And that will go something like that. And the good thing is when you're painting, you can always refine the shapes later. They, you know, there's plenty of scope for error. And that's fine. So if you don't hear any noise, it's not that the sound's gone, it's probably that I'm just concentrating a bit. Right, so there we go. That's roughly where the elements are going to go. If we look at the picture, we'll see there's quite a big space down on the right hand side on the tractor. I'm not sure if that will work very well. I tend not to like big spaces. They scare me a bit if I just leave them blank, but we'll see. So let's beg your pardon. Matt? Are you? Yeah, I am. Do you want to join? You? Okay, bye-bye. Sorry, forgot to turn my phone off. It's off now. Right, so I'm going to start off then with some colour. Now, I like to think about my paintings as a bit of a scene. So it's like it could be like a scene from a film or something. And what you want to do, I mean, I was quite glad the way the camera picked up the figure and blurred the rest behind it. That was quite nice. So we're going to try and give this scene a bit of a sense of depth. Okay, so what we're going to do, we are going to work with this negative space and just start with a grey at the back. So I've got just a bit of grey here. And we can just start laying it down at the back, again using this idea of the negative space. We could use a bit of wet and wet technique in a moment, but let's just start laying down some, I know it doesn't look a very interesting colour, I must say, but it doesn't really matter for the time being. Let's just put it down. Okay, using our negative space just to leave the tree alone. So you could say that that's what the negative space is, just leaving things alone and painting around them. So we'll do that a bit. So this is what we might call like the background, or the, you know, we've got the foreground here, the middle ground, and so we're just painting the background at the moment. Not necessarily doing any detail, not worrying that we're getting the figures perfectly right. Maybe just thinking about where they lie. At the beginning is always a good chance to put a bit of colour in, because as we build up the painting, we don't get the chance to put down some bright colours so much. So now's a good chance. So let's put a bit of that. Can you see in the back there's a house with a bit of sort of brown house. So I could put that in. Yeah, just imagine it's a house over there. Something like that. And then another bit of house there. Every time you want to get some new watercolour, you've got your brush, get a rag, just dip it into the water, get the colour out, and then, so you can actually use the same brush for all your painting if you like. Maybe put a bit of blue in the sky, shall we? Okay. Okay, let's just imagine there's a sky coming down here and down here and over here, for example. And then let's carry on darkening it a bit down here, maybe turn it a bit greener. While you're doing this, don't worry about the colours too much, because the most important thing is thinking about the negative and positive space, so where the figures sit with each other. The colour, as you'll see as we carry on working, is really not going to make or break the picture, but whether you've got your values right will. When you talk about values, values are tonal values, so dark to light. People also talk about a value scale, so from going from very light to very dark. So I think that's enough for the time being for our background. Just leave it there. Try and refine our negative shape a bit, like that. A tree's slightly over there, isn't it? So I'm just going to change that this time. There. And a bit there. So we've got our initial background in. Okay. Okay, so next thing to do is the middle ground. So that's the whole area, the tractor, the cows, the tree, all that. I I like the colour of the tractor, so maybe we can just sort of, to differentiate it, make it a blue. It's a bit like a stage set in a way, you know, when you have the sliding stage set. To think about a painting like this in terms of that stage set, where you've got the foreground trundling in, then the background or the mid ground in the middle on its little rollers, and then the background which is just painted on the back. That's if you want to give any idea of depth, of distance. Just to simplify, as I say, really simplifying things is a main problem certainly I have with painting. I think many other painters do as well. So now we're in the middle ground here. I'm just going to put the tractor in. Just going to lay it in like a block, and I'm just going to imagine that the middle ground here, I'm even going to, I think I'll just paint the cows in blue at the moment. I don't think it's gonna, I don't think they'll look too blue in the end. Hopefully not. And then, so there's my calf. So that's pretty much, just go to the end there. That's my middle ground. And then I might as well go straight to the foreground and finish getting this figure out. As you see, we've not touched the figure at all. We've just left it as a cutout. Okay, so let's darken things a bit. Let's make it into a kind of a dark there. Let's give it maybe a bit of warmth as well. So I'll put a bit of red into that black. And so let's try and follow the shape of the lady. She goes down somewhere like that. As I say, it's not going to be exact. Take the opportunity of trying to paint in these wheels, maybe. I may have to change it completely, but it just gives us an indication. So the bucket is sort of this kind of shape, isn't it? And the leg is sort of at the background. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just leaving a negative shape for that leg. I'm not actually painting it. And again, here where the calf is, I'm just trying to give an impression of where things are. It's kind of very likely that the shape itself is wrong in the end, but well, you know, you have to in painting, you pretty much have to commit to things, and then if they're wrong, you've got to, I suppose, make the most of them. Otherwise you go mad, really, wouldn't you? Okay, so how's that looking? So I know this black may look really over the top, but I think it's only because it's contrasted now with the white of the paper, but it's actually not. You know, it's pretty much like a mid-tone. So if you thought about a value range from white to black, it would probably be like in the middle. At this stage, it's probably good to be thinking about things you're kind of interested in bringing out. So I'm kind of interested in this base that the lady's on. It's quite striking. And so I want to enhance that green somehow. Let's see how we get on with that. So, Annie, I hope you're still with us, having a little paint along. If there's any questions you have, just write them up and I can answer them for you. Or anyone else who's joined, don't be shy to say hi. Hopefully the buffering issue has stopped now as well, so we're back to full strength. If you see me from time to time concentrate on down here, I'm kind of trying to keep the technical aspect under control, which is all very new to me. Very fun, but okay. Right, so now we've got a choice. We could either go back to the background, but it's probably a better idea to start developing the figure a bit. We're going to be patient in this painting. We do, after all, have another hour and a half to complete it in, so there's no rush. And we want to have this patient build up so that we're constantly comparing one tonal value against another to try and bring the figures out gradually. I've never been able to paint one figure and then the one next to it and then the one next to it and hope that it all looks good in the end. I tend to need to build it up more gradually than that. So for the figure, I think I'm just going to give it a nice kind of warm colour. I don't know if maybe this will be too... It may look a bit weird at first, but I'm just going to give it a go. And I'm going to put some red in, some sort of red, yeah, like that. And I know that's not really the colour it is, and I know it looks kind of dark, but it will lighten, I think. And the reason I'm putting a nice sort of warm colour in is I want to bring the figure forward, and warm colours like reds and oranges and warm yellows tend to do that. Right, let's use a different, where's my medium brush? Here we go. Okay, let's do these boots. Okay, boots go down to about here, don't they? It's all flowing quite a lot, which is kind of nice. I mean, I quite like the idea of having quite a nice wet feel to the painting. As you can see, I'm not really measuring things. I'm not trying to make these things look particularly like boots. I mean, you know, if they did suddenly look like boots, that'd be great. But in watercolor, I think I prefer just to follow the shapes rather than try to follow the detail. I also find it quite nice to to keep everything quite wet, which means that the kind of the paint flows into. So if I were to put another colour next to this, for example, let's put a bit of. I don't know if you can actually see it on the camera, but this is actually a more ready one. It will flow in, and so you'll get these lovely variations in colour. So every time I go back, you can see I'm darkening it each time. I don't want to over darken it, but I'm trying to refine the shape a bit better. So at first, as I did with the tree in the introduction, you kind of just do a geometric tree, more or less placing it in the space. And every time you go back to the figure, it gives you a chance to refine the figure slightly and home in on it a bit. I mean, it's never going to be exact, this way of doing it, but you know, it gives you a chance to develop it bit by bit. And some painters much prefer just stopping when it's very, you know, rough, bare bones kind of image, which is lovely. They're often beautiful. They're very, very attractive to look at, because, you know, remember we're trying to paint an attractive picture. So, you know, all the mistakes and things that happen aren't necessarily a bad thing, because they could look nice, and that's what we're aiming for. Particularly in watercolour, you need to have that attitude. Oops, kind of giving it a snout. Right, well, I don't know where you're at your painting, but I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm halfway through, but I'm feeling that the figures are kind of, I suppose, becoming a bit more solid or a bit more precise. My initial drawing, if you saw at the beginning, was very rough. So the preciseness of the painting is coming with each time I go back to a certain layer and home in on the forms a bit more. Okay, so I think I'm going to go back to maybe the mid ground, so the area around here a bit, and see if I can home in on that a bit. Now the tree I've forgotten altogether, so I think I'll use this blue, might as well, and just add a bit of a slight bit of yellow, make it into a green. Yeah, it doesn't really matter at this stage if it's not the right colour. There'll be plenty of opportunity to improve it, but I'll make it green anyway. The most important thing isn't necessarily whether you got the colour right, but whether it's, you know, the right light or dark. I mean, luckily in watercolour we can go in, you know, back to it again and again. But if you suddenly put things that are too dark, obviously you can actually take the watercolour off if it doesn't dry too much. Okay, so there's my tree. Just it'll need more work later, but okay, let's go into the cows. I'm a bit worried about the cows because the shapes are a bit difficult because they're not laid side on, they're kind of coming towards us, so there's a bit of foreshortening, and I know no cow anatomy whatsoever, so I'm going to rely very much on just the negative and positive shapes and try and figure out how the cow's going to emerge from there. So we've got some blobs on the cow, so let's try and use them to give a shape to it. Now the first little blob comes around the center there. It starts up here somewhere and it comes down here, leaving this shape, and there's another little blob around it. There's this kind of trying to get the shape. I'm trying to look at the negative and positive shape and seeing the relationship there. So that's what I'm doing. Actually, there's quite a big shadow under here going all the way down. So in fact, a lot of this cow is kind of in shadow. So all this area here, you know, I could just put it in a shadow, sort of going all the way down there. I hope that will work. Okay. And then again for the calf, a lot of the calf is actually in shadow as well. So, oh dear, this calf's in a bit of a state, really, isn't it? But there is a shadow. So most of it's in shadow. There's a little light at the end there. So I think I'll deal with the spots a bit later. Right, okay. Now to the tractor. Again, you can see on the tractor there's a sort of light hitting the top, but the side's actually in shadow. So I'm going to get a blue again and darken the side a bit particularly. So all this area here, you know, just leave a little space at the top. But basically the rest, no, I'm using such a small brush, just get a bit more. There you go. There you go. So all the rest can just go like that. I'm tempted just to use the blue for the shadows as well. As I say, so one of the things I wanted to explore today was simplification, and I think that's really important for my own painting, and often that just means doing things which seem a bit lazy, like instead of getting a new colour on my brush, I'm just using the same one. But the idea is that in the end it would all seem less confusing, a bit easier to read, but it may not. What I don't want to do, here for example, on the tractor, I'm already putting I'm beginning to bring out the figure, but I'm a bit worried that it's all going to be a bit too much detail too far back. So I think I'm tempted just to forget the detail for the time being, and then a bit later stick the detail in. Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to the background again. Let's just choose another, go back to a grey maybe. You can experiment with, if you've got watercolours, or, you know, try making your own grey. You can put three, you know, red, blue and yellow could make you a nice grey. You can experiment, it may be a bit browner, maybe a bit greener, but it's always fun making greys out of different colours. So I'm going to put a bit of this cool blue in my grey. And I'm just going to bring out my houses again. Oh. So, shall I leave a bit of space for a blue sky? I could do. Not sure how that's going to work. Little tower there or something. At least it's an opportunity to bring this figure out a bit. Bring that down a bit as well. And here we want to make this cow stand out. So the fact that we're putting a dark colour above will make that grey lighten a bit, which is quite nice. I try and leave the little funnels blank so that we can see them emerge. Now with watercolour, some people prefer to paint with the paper flat, which means that the paper will, you know, you can put you can wet it lots and it won't run. In my case, I'm painting with it vertical, just so I can see the screen and you and everything, which is nice as well, which is very good when you're trying to paint a portrait or a still life or something. You're looking at the thing and you're looking at your painting at the same time. Obviously the problem is that the painting will tend to run a bit, which doesn't matter, and if it does tend to pool as gravity pulls it down, you can always get dry your brush a bit and then just lift it off. Can you see? Here it's running down, so I'm just going to go back and lift it off. Yeah, so your brush has just got to be a bit drier than your paint, and then gravity will just suck it in. Okay, so I think it's time to go back into our figure a bit. Okay, so we've got the main figure, and now we're going to break it up into smaller bits. So probably a good idea to use a slightly smaller brush, although probably not that small, because the tendency if I go with a very small brush, I'll tend to try and do detail, and at this stage it's just too early. Okay, so let's have a look at the figure, look at where we can break this figure down a bit. So all this area, for example, is more in shadow than that area. So that would be a way of breaking this figure down. So we could try that. Now to do that, we could just use a bit of a lovely colour. I love using this colour. It's kind of, when you don't know what colour to put down, you reach for some raw umber, which is kind of greeny brown. And that, when you're not sure about the colour, yeah, probably a good tip, instead of putting it straight on, is to just have a little piece of watercolour paper next door, try it out. If it looks okay, use it. Okay, so I'm just going to divide this lady into light and dark. So this side is kind of dark. She's got a t-shirt or other shirt there. Her shoulders go down here somewhere. But all this area pretty much is in shadow. There's a bit of, oops, kind of goes down there. There. This leg is kind of half in shadow, so I'll paint this half in shadow. That could be the underside of her arm. I'll just paint that in. Then under here as well, she's kind of carrying the pail, and there's the underside of her arm is a bit darker as well, so all the way down like that. Okay, and then this side again, slight darkness over here. Okay, so we're never going to, you know, get a detailed account of this lady, but we want a sort of an idea. So what about the green base that I'm so keen on? Okay, well, could put some yellow down and a bit of this blue and start with that. Now this is going to give us a very, sort of running. It's still, I don't really want it to run too much because I want my green to be quite green. So, so I'll paint some green in here. It doesn't matter if it runs a bit, but I really don't want it to just sort of flood out too much. That'll do. Okay, so that's quite a nice green. So, how are we doing? Right, I'm glad a few more people have joined us. You're about halfway in, and so what we've done is we've been talking about negative space. So a lot of my painting today, instead of painting the figures, I've been painting around the figures, and I'll show you as we carry on what I mean by this negative space. But it's very important in watercolour so that you can build up your, your lights and darks gradually, that kind of idea. If you're joining us and you're painting with other media, that's fine as well, because these ideas of negative space, simplification, you know, they can be adapted to any kind of media, drawing, acrylics, oils, whatever. So you've joined us at a stage where I've been trying to develop a background up here, a middle ground and a foreground. And these like the tractor and the cows and the trees, have basically come about because I've left an area blank and sort of painted in later. Now, the stage the figures are at, as you can see, very rudimentary. We've got this cow that at the moment is, I've left it blank, and then, beg your pardon, I've begun to try and separate out the light from the dark. So again, I've taken the figure and I'm just breaking it down each time from a simple shape to a slightly more complex shape. But bearing in mind that I'm not putting any detail in. Again, the figure, I left it blank first of all, and then I started sort of chunking out the main light and dark area. Beg your pardon. If you're not sure about any part of this process and you want to ask a question or write a comment or whatever, please do so in the chat box on the right hand side, and every now and then I can answer those questions. So we have about an hour to go, about halfway through, so it'd probably be a good time to think about the next stage of our painting. As I've mentioned, we're trying this sort of like patient approach where we're building up the whole painting together. So instead of thinking about finishing the tractor and moving on to the cow or the tree, we're thinking more in the lines of putting like one colour or one wash for the background, a slightly different colour for the middle ground, and then broad washes for the foreground. So we're thinking in large areas, beg your pardon, rather than small detail. Okay, so at the moment also, things like these, what look pretty dark here, actually isn't very dark, so still plenty of scope to darken that. So in a range of values, we've probably got light to mid values, if that. Okay. So let's go back into the middle ground. Okay, back to the tractor a bit. Okay, this time I'm using a smaller brush, and I just want to give the impression of all this engine-y type stuff. I'm not going to, I don't know much about tractor engines, so I'm not going to try and reproduce the individual pistons and things, but I do want to just give this idea of machinery. What's nice about this technique is you learn to observe things. So I'm observing, for example, that on top of this tractor wheel, the front one, that the light is actually touching the top of the wheel. So in fact, that although we know in our mind that the wheel is black, the background is much darker. And I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about painting, is that, you know, you learn to observe things that otherwise you wouldn't. You know, why would you? Life's too short. The only disadvantage of painting with the paper vertical is that it tires your arm out a bit. But the advantage is that it's probably more control over your paint a bit. It does not pool so much. Okay, so that's fine for the tractor for the time being. Now the tree, let's do something about the tree. What should I do? So again, this like wash that I put down, when it dries much lighter than you know, when it's wet. So I'm going to use it to represent all the lighter areas. So I can see here on the right there's it's a sort of 3D Lego tree. So I'm just going to imagine that that's the edge of it, and it's got little blocks of Lego leaf coming out, so I can leave a few of those in. I don't really want to try and reproduce any individual things too much here, but go back to this poor calf. I don't think that the time's come just yet, but it's often quite good to detach yourself from the model as well, and not to become enslaved by it. So I find I get stuck a bit trying to reproduce what I'm looking at, and I disengage from the picture as a whole. And really, the most important thing is the picture, because after all, you know, if you put it on your wall or you show it to somebody, they've never seen your initial model anyway. So, you know, it's always good just to think, well, if it looks good in the painting, it's good. You know, even if it doesn't look like the thing you're painting. That's what I go by anyway. Okay, so back to these cows. Okay, I don't hold out much hope for this poor calf because I'm finding it quite hard, but we shall see. The belly goes under there a bit. It's got a sort of blob over here. And then it's got you know, you can also draw with watercolour. You know, if you're not sure about the shape, I'm just going to try and draw it in now, because I've realised I've kind of lost it a bit. There we go, that was all wrong. Yeah, I can see a calf there. And then here, go back and put the this blob on the end. Right, how are we doing? Should we go back to the figure? Right, let's go back to this plinth the lady's on. Okay, so it's nice and dark on this side. Coming down like that. We could make most of it. Let's just put it all this colour, except for a little ridge there, which kind of denotes, you know, the edge of the plinth, like that. And then we could have all this area kind of nice and dark. And then make this area slightly lighter, maybe. Doesn't look much lighter, but okay. Now let's go to the lady's head and her arms a bit. So we've got this lovely colour here, which is like nice brown. So we could use that just to give a bit of shape to those hands, and let's see, roughly there. Bit of a light there, something like that. And then she's carrying, I don't know what it is. Carrying something anyway, don't know. And now her hair. In fact, yeah, so we've got, let's try and do a bit of hair like that, side of the head, and just try and bring out this open neck she's wearing around there. Again, I'm still trying to do this idea of joining up negative shapes rather than thinking about, you know, where her jawline should be or her nose. I'm just thinking more about trying to join up different shapes. And then sometimes it looks nothing like the thing, but often, you know, it does, you can kind of home in on the figure. Okay, let's make this a bit grayer now. Too much light. Okay, she's not really very 3D at the moment, so I think we need to kind of go in and try and sculpt her out a bit more. The mental problem I have, and a lot of people have this as well, is we can see from the figure that she's wearing a kind of a light, maybe yellowy, beigey type of top overalls, and that's sort of fixed in our mind. So it's very hard then to darken certain areas, maybe with sort of dark blue or purple or whatever. We think, well, but it's beige, but it's light yellow. So it's mentally quite hard sometimes to darken certain areas, but we shall try and get over that and go in with a bit of, oh, this is quite dark, but maybe it's too dark. Well, I hope not, but let's try this. So what I'm going to try and do now is give her a bit more shape. Okay. Let's darken these boots a bit. Now, the painting you can see me doing, I've noticed that because I think I set the, I'm just going to change the settings a bit because it's very bright. See if I can. Maybe it won't allow me to, but because I've put too much brightness on it, so therefore that's more like it. Yeah, okay. Right, that's more like what I'm looking at. It's kind of bright before. So I'm going to go into the boots again now. Okay, welcome everyone. Anyone who's joined on. We're about 2/3 of the way through this painting. What we've done is we've built up the figures gradually. We've by this process of leaving negative shapes. So instead of painting the things themselves, like the cows and the tractors, we're building up the darkness behind them to bring them forward. That's the general approach that I'm taking with this watercolour. So if you can see that there's not much detail from the beginning, but the detail is kind of coming gradually, hopefully. And as with many paintings, they improve if you stand back from a bit, because, as I say, there's no great detail. So if you just joined us, hopefully you're painting along. If you've got any questions, please write them in the little chat box on the right hand side, and you know, any questions or things you want to know, I can answer them. But in the meanwhile, I shall just carry on. Now I was on the boots. Okay, now they look kind of black, but they're not as black as they could be, so I'm just going to leave little areas where there's a slight highlight and see if that kind of gives this idea of light shining on it. And there's slightly more light there, and it looks like her feet are well placed in the grass there. Again, this one, just leave a bit of a highlight there. Right, I think at the moment the background, I'm going to move back to the background because it's really too distracting at the moment. I want more attention on the figure, and although on the picture you can see all the sort of painted houses and things, I think I prefer it to be a lot more kind of less intrusive. So, and I think the way of doing that is by having it darker, having these less light. So I'm going to try and still give that impression of, I don't know, sky, but less contrasty. And then these buildings again, they can be, you know, brown maybe, but I think I don't really want them to be, oh dear, I made a very strange sort of mauvey colour there. And so the nice thing, the thing I really like about backgrounds is you can really play around with them. You know, just imagine you're doing this sort of abstracty painting. Maybe I've overdone this a bit, but well, I just didn't want to have too much detail there. Okay, so back to the next layer, which is the tractor. Again, I'm just going to give this idea of sort of mechanic type bits. I'm not going to try and imagine what they are, but just try and bring out some forms. At the moment, I'm not sure whether to paint from the little photocopy I've got in front of me or from the screen, which is basically what you're watching there. It's easier painting what you're painting. nice. As I was saying before, really my problem when I paint is that I tend to get sucked into detail and worry about what I'm painting, whether it looks like the thing I'm painting, but really I should just sit back a bit and try and look at the whole, which is much more important really, because, you know, who gives a damn about the, you know, what you're painting if in the end your painting isn't very interesting. So, okay, how's that? That tractor's quite nice now. It's kind of coming out of the background. I think if I darken the foreground even more, it will look more kind of, you know, sat in space. At the moment it's floating a bit, but I think that's because there's this area which is too light underneath it. I think it's a bit better. Still on the tractor, it's still too I don't know what to do really to stop it being so much of a cutout. I think to do a bit with it, even though it's quite dark. It's not dark enough. I wanted to kind of the tractor to feel part of that area. So I think it needs to be, I think the shadows need to go in quite a bit more. That might do it. Just maybe that's just too. Okay. We've got about half an hour to finish this. I tend to find that my painting improves when I've been to relax a bit, and that's usually about now. So probably a good idea just to go with things, have a good opportunity just to go with things, and not worry too much about the results. That's usually a good recipe for an improved painting. Okay, I've kind of given up trying to follow the colours that I should be, because it's not really helping me, so I'm just adding my own kind of colours to it. What I like about this red is that it brings the figure forward a bit, so independently of what colour the lady actually is, the warm colour just separates it out against a colour of the same value. If the colour behind is a kind of blue, the red is the same sort of tonal value, the red will come forward. So it's quite useful really in that sense to bring the figure forward a bit. So I'm not trying to give her any facial expression, just so if anyone's having a look at her face, then they can read what they like into her, you know, the dabs of paint become something to someone observing it. So I'm going to go with some green in that middle section behind her. Not sure at this point if this colour is going to run, but if it does, then I just got to have a cloth ready. Go back to that rather nice. Not with that. No. this shadow of the cow blue. It'd be quite nice. And this one, little calf, like daughter, like mother. Now, I've done what I tend to do with my painting, just carry on trying to experiment and change things, and as you will have noticed, they get darker and darker. And that's the downside of using this technique, I suppose, that you're constantly eating into these little areas, sculpting them out. And watercolour is different from other mediums, that you can't really go backwards. You can't suddenly decide to drop some white paint over it all, and hence things tend to darken quite a lot. I mean, this little area here is quite nice, really, I suppose. I mean, I'm not sure if, I think that cow behind is very blue. I'm not sure if I like it. I think maybe it's too blue. Maybe I should just try and integrate it slightly more into what's happening. Because it looks like it's just like a phantom at the moment. Let's just try and give it a bit of a just like the fact that it unifies it a bit to the lady. Just pushes it back slightly. I'm beginning to do detail now. I'm not sure why really, but it just helps to kind of sculpt the So 15 minutes to go. I'm just finishing it off now, and please let me know how you're doing at home, whether you've had a go at this, or whether you encountered any problems. And also let me know if there's something else you'd like to look at in any future sessions. So for example, it could be a certain aspect of watercolour painting, it could be something to do with colour, something to do with tonal values, something to do with material. I'm happy to help you if you have any questions as well. If you have any comments about the videos, also you can just post a comment later as well. So another 15 minutes, and let's just see if I can finish off certain areas. As it is, I'm quite happy with the figure. I quite like the way that she's kind of come forward, and I quite like the way that she's, you know, there's a certain amount of volume there, but not too much. I mean, I could have, I suppose, increased that slightly, given her a bit more of a bit more volume, but I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I don't want to overdo it. The cows were always going to be a bit of a problem for me. Fine, I'm not sure why the blue's blob there, but you know, I think they are recognisable as cows. If there are bits you really want to go into again, what you can do is you can get a brush. Say you want to lighten, I don't know, this a bit. You just get some water, dampen it slightly, and you can see, well, you should be able to see how you can actually pull a bit of colour back. And the same goes on the face. If I wanted to lighten a bit on her forehead, for example, or the top of her hair, I would just, can you see how it's just lightened? So you can kind of go back on things, you know, if you want to say, okay, I want to make that lighter again. Yeah. And it gives quite a nice effect as well. So I could kind of invent some trees in the background, maybe like that. I mean, it's not, you can't really control what it does so much, because basically you're just scraping off paint, aren't you? But you know, there is a certain amount of leeway of going backwards rather than just forwards. In fact, it'd be quite interesting just to, this whole area might do with a bit of lightening up. See what happens. And just imagine that here there's some trees and some space between the trees, that kind of thing, like that. Darken this area a bit. Bit. Again, I want it. I don't want the tractor to feel that it's too prominent. So, but just by darkening this a bit, hopefully it just puts it back. Right, cow-wise, I don't think there's much more I can do about these cows. I've reached the end of my, just a bit of, give it a bit of brown, just to give it a bit of colour interest, I suppose. Don't want to turn it into a brown cow, but maybe give this machine a bit more of a I think I might just finish off darkening the middle ground. It suddenly seems to have got darker, and I just like things that kind of separate out, as I was saying before, the middle ground with the background. So you can see that the foreground's slightly lighter, isn't it? So you've got a kind of light, dark, and then light happening. I can just maybe add a bit more green here, just to give it slightly more oomph. Yeah, and there is slightly more oomph, as I said, in the if I take a picture and put it on Facebook later or Instagram or whatever, it will give you a slightly better idea of what I was painting. That what's picked up here isn't that great, but I'm not really sure about why I painted that blue. I should just lift it off a bit. It's just too blue, isn't it? That's more interesting. And then this cow, the back, I just want to give it a bit more of a shape. Then maybe the front as well. Here, let the give the tree a bit of a final sort of yeah, I like the I think I'd like the tractor to fade a bit somehow. I just don't. I just think it's too strong. All these areas. The trouble is, when your paper gets very wet, and there's no point in trying to put more paint on because it's just saturated and it just dribbles down, and you can actually make it lighter rather than darker. maybe the background, I think. Maybe I'll go back. Maybe if I just do something with the background here, it may just improve the tractor a bit. Yeah. In fact, that whole area should improve with a bit of scraping. There you go, I couldn't resist trying to put a bit of detail in. Typical. Okay, well, there you go. Let's have a go. It's you can see there the final result. Hopefully that's given you an overview of well, my watercolour painting technique, but also some ideas that will help you with your own painting. As I said, it's not necessarily a video for advanced painters or beginners, you know, because both hopefully can get something from it, particularly if you're a painter already. Just seeing how someone else paints is always quite fascinating. I do it all the time anyway. Thanks very much for watching this, whether you've watched it live or whether you've watched it later on. As I say, if you've got any comments, please write them in the box. And so, yeah, just spend the last few moments on the painting. If you have any finished paintings that you would like to send in to the Instagram account, I will put it on the comments box when I finished streaming now. It's also in the live stream box. I put it at the top there so you can scroll up and have a look there. People are doing different activities for Cardiff Metropolitan University School of Art and Design BA Open Week. Obviously, due to the pandemic, they weren't able to do an exhibition where you could actually visit, but they've done a really good job in doing an online show, so have a look at that. And people are sending in the results of various tasks they've set, etc. So if you want to do that, you post it on Instagram. The website is Cardiff Met CSAD hashtag cmetcreate. So you go on the Instagram account, post your picture, and then hashtag cmetcreate, like this. I'll show you. Okay. Right, so thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've got something out of it, and hopefully tune in again if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel and you'll get notifications of future programs live streams or little clips that I put on. I'm thinking maybe of putting on some clips on specific issues, and so if you have a specific issue, just let me know. Okay. All right. So for this morning, I hope you've had a pleasant morning painting, and see you next time.